Tabletop Spotlight, brought to you by Dragon's Lair Comics and Fantasy.
Hey everyone, I'm JayArr with Bell of Lost Souls.
And I'm Steven with Dragon's Lair Comics and Fantasy.
Welcome to Tabletop Spotlight.
Indeed, and I hear you're pretty big on RPGs, JayArr.
I am, and Star Wars as well.
I have a good combination for you today, though. So this is the Star Wars Dawn of Rebellion Sourcebook for any of the Star Wars RPGs, regardless of which one you're playing.
So, Edge of Empire.
Edge of Empire, we got it.
Force and Destiny.
We got you.
Age of Rebellion.
Absolutely.
I mean, that makes sense. Dawn of Rebellion, it's in the name.
You would hope, but this applies to all three. It's got stuff for players, it's got stuff for the GMs. It's a really cool book. Let's dive in.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's take a look inside the Dawn of Rebellion.
Absolutely. So, love the interior art.
Yeah.
Like immediately out of the gate, you're getting a real good Star Wars vibe. But let's, take it from the top. Table of contents here. You get a nice little preview of flavor for all the different planets that are featured in. It's worth mentioning this book pulls a lot from that time period between episodes 3 and 4.
Yeah.
So the stuff featured in Star Wars Rebels show,
Rogue One, that kind of thing. Yeah.
So a lot of good stuff there.
There are a few familiar names already leaping out at me, like Dathomir and Jeddah. So that's kind of cool. Then you get a little bit on organizations.
You get the Empire, some of the independent factions, like the stuff you were featured in Rogue One. And then later in the book, you get stuff specifically for player options and game master things, which is very cool.
Well, let's start going through. So,
I like this. It really sets a tone. If you're setting your game in this time period, you're going to be getting, you could pull any paragraph out of here and do this as a intro to your campaign of what life in the Empire is like and the reasons why your characters, whether you're playing as Empire or as Rebellion separatists.
And this is kind of like the big setup. Here's the intro to all of the different planets. And you'll also see the kind of introduce people of interest for each planet. So here's Alderaan.
And of course, with Alderaan, we should talk about its chief senator, Princess Leia over here. And I like how they spice these in to the book intermittently instead of just a whole big block section of here's all the NPCs. And by naturally integrating it this way, you can, as a GM, show off hey, here's the planet that we're talking about, and here's a character that maybe you're going to be introduced to.
And then they'll talk about different points of interest. And then what I really like as a GM primarily, you get a different sort of mission or a couple of encounter seeds for what might happen on each of the planets, including this one is a Mercy Mission Misdirection, where it's basically the PCs are trying to keep Imperial security from discovering some stuff that House Organa is smuggling, and it gives you some guidelines on how to do that. And you've got a lot of planets in here, including Atollon, we mentioned Dathomir, here's
the Death Star. That's basically a planet.
Yeah, I mean, it's no moon, that's for sure.
But yeah, it is nice that each one of these is given time to breathe and you can read through it. And I think that those example encounters work for a lot of different scenarios, not just the planet that they're featured on, which is nice.
Yeah.
We start getting into the different organizations, both life in there and then some of the NPCs and things you'll encounter within that.
Absolutely.
Which is very cool.
What also, kind of like you mentioned, everything is scattered through there. You get a mix of rules and also lore kind of interspersed, so there's something cool in each section, and in this section, of course, there's everyone's favorite Thrawn.
Absolutely.
And then we have things like the Imperial Security Bureau and lots of common enemies that you'll find. This is kind of like there's Vader himself. This is sort of a guide to enemies and other things that your opponents might fight, or allies if they are rebels.
And I don't want to give everything away, though, so let's skip ahead a little bit.
Go ahead and skip ahead.
Let's talk about some of the player options you get.
Yeah.
I think this is one of my favorite little features, is the different character races that are available. There are polar Wookiees, y'all. They're called Gigorans, but they are totally just ice Wookiees, and I love it.
Absolutely.
But you might recognize some of these from the recent movie. Or movies. And there's a lot of cool stuff in here, and each one has its own unique features. You're getting lore and the planets that they're from.
And then, of course, there's the new specialties, like the Force Adherent here.
For sure. You're basically getting, unique character classes to
They'll
pick
have
and
their
choose
own
from.
talent trees.
And this stuff is all like better explained in later sections.
Absolutely.
So like here's just like the tree, and then here's like the actual
here's
ways
what all
how
of the
it
talents
works.
do. So basically, if you want to bring more of that rebelling against the Empire, but not necessarily fighting in the Civil War, the Galactic Civil War, but more like, you know, doing covert ops, or even if you do want to play in some of the iconic battles, this has got you covered. And we can't talk about this without mentioning like the Game Master support stuff.
Yeah,
here.
it gives you ideas for how to run your sessions in like an overarching campaign. It gives you ideas for like character hooks, and a lot of the stuff is interspersed in the book, but then it better explains and like elucidates on that in the back, which is
Absolutely.
nice.
And then one thing that I want to point out that I really like this book does is it talks about like one of the things that's iconic to Star Wars is the duel against like
The big villains,
yeah.
the Sith,
Exactly, and it's super personal, right? Like the reason those fights resonate so much is because it matters to the character, like the antagonist of the duel matters to the characters, and so they do a great job of telling you how to set up that kind of confrontation in your campaign. It's really cool stuff if you are wanting to use this, whatever system you're playing.
Totally. There's a lot to learn here.
Well, that's the book. Let's hop out for the outro.
Sounds good.
Well, that's the Dawn of Rebellion. That's pretty cool.
It's a pretty good book.
I am excited to see like the new specializations that they've introduced and kind of how those would fit into the different systems.
Yeah, and those are great for the players. And then you've got all the cool NPCs available for the
Right.
GMs to take part. But let's talk numbers here. It is an RPG, so like the number of players you have at your table and how long you play is going to vary. But as far as like the cost, this book is $39.95, which for a source book that applies to all three systems, I think that's a really solid
Yeah, that's
deal.
a super solid deal, especially since with the source book you get Thrawn himself.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I'm JayArr,
I'm Steven with Dragon's Lair Comics and Fantasy.
and this has been Tabletop Spotlight. Thanks for watching.
Thank you.
Click to subscribe. Support us on Patreon. Check out more videos. And thanks for watching.